More therapy, more trauma work, worse mental health. Let's talk about why the system designed to heal us might be keeping us stuck. We are your whistleblowing shrinks, Dr. Teralyn and therapist Jenn, and this is the Gaslit Truth Podcast. Oh my gosh. Before we set this whole conversation on fire, like, subscribe, ring that bell. If this show has ever put words to something you felt but couldn't explain, supporting it matters.
That's right. And just to remind everybody, Dr. Teralyn and I are deprescribers. So one of the things that we can help you do is to get off psychiatric medication safely for the brain and for the body. So if that's something you've been thinking about doing, hit us up, send us an email, thegasittruthpodcast@gmail.com.
Please welcome Dr. Richard L. Blake, PhD in psychology, breathwork teacher, to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. I think we came across you on TikTok. You suddenly started posting some content and it was like, oh, he's speaking my language.
Yeah,
yes. Jen and I were immediately talking about you, and you had some controversial things that I don't really feel are that controversial, but I think the general population thinks it to be controversial. So we're going to get right into your story and the message that you want to bring to our listeners today.
Well, yes. Thank you. Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So I don't know where you want to begin. Would you like to begin? Because you have a PhD in psychology, which I find very fascinating. But you're heavy into breath work and also heavy into understanding why trauma is become such a big pop psychology culture place. Everybody's hinging on their trauma as why they are the way they are. And I think you have a story around that.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a bit of my background then. So I started in corporate real estate and had depression, anxiety, became a fitness model, thought getting attention for taking my shirt off in magazines would make me happy. And it did for about a few weeks. And then I was...
a few weeks? Okay.
Yeah, probably
All
a few
right.
weeks. And then the depression came back, but it was worse. It was now like, I achieved this goal. My goal from being age 14 was get in Men's Health magazine. And once I did that, I was more depressed because now I was like, what do I do? I'm still depressed and I've achieved this goal. And so then I developed an eating disorder to add to that with all the extreme dieting. And things really spiraled from there. And then,
but can I ask you about how old you were when all this was going on?
About 24.
Okay. Oh, critical age. Yep.
Yep. And I started therapy, and that helped with the depression. And it didn't really help with the addiction stuff, though. So it's been many years in therapy, kind of getting back to sort of off the floor, as you would say. I was no longer suicidal, but I was still not great. And that's when I discovered breathwork and plant medicines and things like that, ayahuasca. And that was what really sort of helped me get free of the addiction from food. And at the same time, I was like, therapy is great. I'm going to go study to become a psychotherapist. And I did about 2 years of it. And whilst writing essays, supporting psychotherapy, I was supposed to be like, psychotherapy is amazing, here's all the stats. And then I would look at the stats and be like, oh wait, it only works for like 40% of people, and then 48% of those people relapse, and then for addiction it works for about 8% of people. And I kept on trying to sort of fight reality and be like, therapy's amazing, everyone needs therapy. And then one day I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I can't live this lie. And at the same time, I was getting amazing results from breathwork. I was getting amazing results with clients as I was already certified in breathwork. And I started working for a charity in the UK called Duty to Care. And we were giving free mental health services to staff of the National Health Service during the pandemic. And I would get calls from doctors and psychologists and nutritionists who were all working for the NHS saying, I've heard about this breathwork thing. I'm stressed. What's the evidence base? And I was like, there was a pilot study in 2003, but no one ever really followed it up. And they were like, no, thanks. Hung up the phone. I couldn't give away breathwork for free at that time. Maybe that was partly because of my personality, and I'm blaming the research because other people could sell it. But nonetheless, I decided I'm going to go do some high quality study moved to San Francisco, started a PhD, and then I ran the largest randomized controlled trial on conscious connected breath work, and it looked at anxiety, and it's just been published in the Journal of Affective Disorders. It's very effective. But yeah, the whole thing during that time was just like, I'm studying psychotherapy and I can't sell this lie. So why is everyone pushing this lie? And that's when I started well, obviously I focused on the breathwork stuff, but it's only within the last year I started sort of speaking out about what I found, like how poor the results are for therapy, and why mental health is making some people worse as well as just not helping.
Yeah, when you're speaking out, you're talking about on social media, more on
Yeah.
social media. Yeah. Can you just kind of let us in, like, how has that been received? Because for me, I was like, yes, but I'm sure that's not what most people were doing.
Yeah. I guess when you get a following, you know, you get people who want to hear what you say. So generally, like if I do, you know, like, for example, I've got like 100 and something thousand followers. Let's say 80% of them agree with me. So most of my comments that just go out to my followers are positive. But when something goes viral and it gets pushed to
Yes.
non-followers, that's when you get all the hate. That's when you get people doing stitches, really saying horrible things about, you know, the way I look, my clothes, my hairstyle, everything. And
Everything but the content of what you're talking about.
yeah.
Yes.
And then some people do the content. I know this happens on both sides of the argument. You know, when there's because I pretty much every reel I do, I cite a study or more. You know, sometimes I'm
You
citing
do. He
5
does. If
different
you watch his
studies.
stuff,
Yeah.
he's always citing research on there
research.
too.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
appreciate that a lot.
And when someone sees a study that agrees with them, they're like, brilliant. Yeah, see, this study proves it. When someone hears something that they don't want to hear, they're like, well, that sample size was small. That control group wasn't it? There was a weak control. Like,
It was a double-blind, randomized control trial. Nope, sorry, junk. Nope.
Yeah. So yeah, for example, I did a reel about the Elizabeth Loftus study. So it's a very famous study, the Lost in the Mall study in 1995, where they basically they told people like 3 truths and a lie. And the lie was that they got lost in the mall when they were a child, and then they were rescued by a kind stranger, and they found that they could insert that memory into about 25% of people. And so, you know, a lot of people were like, wow, yeah, you know, this
fake
is
memory
a
you're
fake
talking
memory.
about.
Yes, a fake memory that did not happen. And when it was inserted with an authority by the researchers, 25% of people believed it. Then someone does a stitch on me basically saying, well, this study was disproven because they tried to do it again when they said they tried to insert a memory of a colonoscopy. And you see, this proves that sexual abuse, you can't insert fake memories when it's a somatic memory. But then they retested that study, and this person didn't mention that study. What they did find was you can insert somatic memories, but you can't insert not believable memories. So if someone's never had a colonoscopy, then they're not going to believe they had a colonoscopy. But when it was actually a believable memory, I can't remember the exact memory now, but you can insert fake somatic memories as well. It's just whether or not it's inserted by someone with authority and it's actually plausible.
You know, that's interesting because, you know, having done loads of trauma work, I have had clients that come in and say these memories came out during therapy, and I always ask, like, how, you know, the repressed memory or whatever. And I'm thinking, is the repressed memory really a repressed memory, or is it an inserted memory based on cues, right? Well, maybe this happened to you. Well, maybe there's a reason that your body reacts that way when a man comes into the room, you know, with a top bun and a beard, right? Like, well, maybe, right? And so I wonder how many therapists insert memory without knowing that they're doing it. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, under
Mhm.
suggestion for sure. And you know, they did actually replicate that study in 2023, and they found actually it was they could insert it into 35% of people. They had a larger sample size. So you know, there is a replication crisis in mental health and all of psychology. But actually, the Elizabeth Loftus study was actually replicated with a larger sample size and found even more people could insert those fake memories. But I mean, it's still a minority. You know, 35% of people. The majority of people are not creating fake memories. But we had Lawrence Petittis on our show. You should have him on. He's a professor at Portsmouth University, and he did this amazing study that was basically when you look at the past or talk about your past, the more times you talk about it, the more negative your perception of it is.
Yes.
And he was even charitable in that, because, as you said, some therapists, they have strong ideologies. They are primed to think parents are abusive. So they insert their beliefs into the conversation with clients, and therefore they can taint the conversation to lead the clients to believe that their parents were abusive or they were traumatized or those types of things. In this study, they didn't do any of that. They just simply asked them to talk about the past, and it became more negative. And that is basically what therapy is doing to a lot of people.
Over and over and over again.
Over and over, which is the argument as to why psychotherapy isn't super effective all the time for many people, which probably falls into what you call the treatment prevalence paradox, which you got to talk, you're starting to probably, I think that's where you're going with some of this, right? Is this idea psychotherapy can really do a lot of damage to people from this perspective, to re-talk or relive something that maybe wasn't pleasant, over and over and over and over and over, 2 ways from Sunday, right? Trying to dig for meaning, try to better understand where it came from. What's the etiology of it? Why did this hit? Like, that can be very, very detrimental for people. And I don't think therapists are super great at knowing where that line is, because they're feeling as though they're helping.
Well, this is going to heal you. This is going to heal the trauma.
They're crying again. Good. We're getting a physiological reaction out of them, right? That means that they must be working through and moving their way through this.
Wait, it's a breakthrough.
Yes.
It's a breakthrough.
It's I hate to break it to everybody, guys, but I'm a therapist, so I feel like I can say this. Okay.
We both are.
The whole process is very subjective from the clinician's standpoint. Which is why the power has to go into the client and not into the clinician, to figure out which way to actually lead therapy, because a therapist could continue to take you down some of those negative spaces. Let's continue to instill that negative memory, those negative emotions. It's one of the reasons why I love EMDR as a trauma therapy, because there's very little talking from that aspect from the clinician. The clinician does very little, very, very little talking. But anyways, that's a little plug for that. So this is fascinating. Tell us. So you're talking about this treatment prevalence paradox. What is that? What does that mean for you?
Yeah. So I think this was a paper from Jorm, and they're Australian researchers, and they looked at Western countries, mostly Australia, but they found the same pattern in pretty much all Western countries, despite more mental health awareness, because that's all we need, right? Guys just need to open up, and we need to talk about our feelings more. Despite record levels of mental health awareness, record levels of people in therapy, more people are mentally ill than at any point in history. And Thomas Insel, he was the former director of the National Institute of Mental Health. He quite humbly admitted this.
Yes, he did.
He basically said, we spent billions trying to cure this stuff, but the more we treat people, the worse they get. Is not the case for heart disease or cancer. When people go in for treatment, they recover, but that's not the case with therapy. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Jorman will talk about low standards of care, lack of access to care, but I don't know if that is actually the case. I think a lot of the reasons is kind of red herrings. Do you know, is that a phrase you guys know? What's a red herring?
Go ahead and explain it to our listeners. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's basically like you think it's like a trap. It's like, it's a distraction. It's not the real thing. And I think trauma is this big red herring. It's like, we think the mental health crisis is caused by trauma. But again, that can't be the case, because we have record low levels of abuse. This is the least abusive time in history, yet we have more people who think they're traumatized than at any time in history. There's also another paradox I call the age paradox. It's like the people who suffered the worst abuse, like famine, food rationing, beatings, like horrific stuff, the older people are the least traumatized. The opposite would be the case. If we were finally learning, it's, abuse has caused these mental health things, we would see more mental illness in older people. And then people just go, it's because older people don't admit admit it, and they're not as in touch with their feelings. We are the enlightened generation.
Yes.
But
enlightened? Now, are we enlightened, or do we pathologize the shit out of
Everybody
single
else.
thing that
Mhm.
ever
Yeah.
happens to us?
So when you go and actually look at hard data, like people who are hospitalized for their mental illness, self-harm, suicide, not self-reported data, it's the same thing. Younger people are the ones ending up in hospital. Older people are not like silently, masking their mental illness and then, actually they're going and committing suicide. It's not. It's the younger people who are doing that type of thing. There's another paradox, which is the Western countries paradox. Incidents of mental illness are about 10% in India, whereas they're about 40 to 50% in the US and about 40% in the UK. And abuse is way, way higher in India than it is in the UK.
Yeah.
And again, they have adjusted this for reporting and stigma. And once even after you adjust for that, mental illness is way better in India, where they abuse their children and beat them, far more frequently.
Yeah.
Well, I also think same rules apply with suicide awareness. It's the same thing. Like I feel like anytime we have an awareness campaign, it makes that thing worse. Like it worsens it. It highlights it. There was a study that they did. They took a group of people, divided them into two, and they put in ADHD awareness videos. I don't know if you heard of this one, but they put in ADHD awareness videos, and the group of people that watched it when they came out, they were all screened. None of them had ADHD. None of the participants met the diagnostic criteria, whatever. They watched the screening movie, and they came out, and 65% of them said they had ADHD.
Yep.
And then they gave them the information about how this was not accurate, not true. And then they all came out 2 weeks later and like, well, I don't have ADHD. Like this is the psychology of influence, which we see in real time on social media. We see it in awareness campaigns, mental health awareness, destigmatize, which I think when we go into the destigmatizing with mental health, we've turned the corner to mental health is cool. Like to have a mental health problem makes you cool. To take psychiatric medication makes you cool. I just saw a psychologist on TikTok today. She had 7 different psych meds and she was dancing around showing everybody all the different meds she had. And I'm like, this, what? At what? I don't understand, I do, because influence is huge and psychology around all of this is huge, and we are misusing it and misinterpreting it, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, social contagion or psychosomatic social contagion is one of the phrases. And it was the same with the DARE, the drugs awareness thing back in the 80s. The exact same thing happened. They went into schools and they were like, are you doing drugs? How many of your friends are doing drugs? And drug usage went up because it's like, everyone's doing drugs. I
remember. Damn.
DARE.
Now I'm traumatized. You brought up DARE. Drug abuse resistance education. There was a song. I had to sing it. Okay. So when we were talking about like how we pathologize everything, or how like modern psychology, pop psychology, everything is trauma, right? We pathologize like everyday human experience, right, is pathologized. Can you tell us your story a little bit about how there was some gaslighting that occurred in terms of trauma with you when you were younger, and what that was supposed to mean for you in your life?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had some challenges growing up. I wasn't abused or neglected, but I wasn't a happy kid. And many therapists tried to make me believe I was abused and neglected for just sort of normal parenting things, normal parenting standards as a child. And I believed that for many years because I'm brilliant. I don't have to do anything. I can just blame everyone else.
Yeah, it's your fault, not mine. I'm just living in this,
For me. I get sympathy as well. And I don't have to, meet the standards of other people because I'm mentally ill and I got abused. Lucky me. It's very easy to convince someone when they are desperate because I was desperate. I was extremely unhappy, and I wanted an answer. And this is actually a really interesting concept called effort after meaning. And it goes back to the trauma stuff. I'm actually writing a book about all this stuff. That's how I know these studies so well right now, because they're fresh in my mind.
Trap in here, man. You got so much research knowledge.
Yeah. So ACE scores, you heard of the ACE score, Adverse
course.
Childhood
Yep.
Event Score? That's like the holy grail in trauma stuff. It's like the more adverse childhood events you have, the more likely you are to be mental illness, to have a mental illness. So that's like addicted.
Do you know how people compare ACE scores? Like they sit and they're like, well, my ACE score was this. What's your ACE score on social media? And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a big flaw in all of these things, in that all of the studies that show a real strong correlation between abuse and mental illness are retrospective studies. So they go and find people who are mentally ill in adulthood and go, did anything happen to you? And they're like, maybe. Yeah. Oh, actually, that thing that was kind of okay at the time, I'm going to reinterpret that as abuse or trauma or all these things. And when they do prospective studies, they go and find actual like proof of terrible abuse. So they go to court records, hospitals, police records, and they follow these children who had terrible abuse. The correlation for mental illness in adulthood is almost non-existent. It's there, but it's tiny. And basically what they find is when you do retrospective studies, people want to find reasons for their unhappiness. And when you give them a really convenient reason, like someone did something to you, they're more likely to believe that. And it's also the same with twin studies. When one twin had mental illness and the other didn't, the one with the mental illness was like, yeah, we were abused. And the other one was like, no, we weren't. We had a normal childhood. So we've got all this like trauma causes mental illness stuff, but actually the research is really, really flaky. And hence that's why I think it's a red herring. And a lot of people hate this because it's, people say I'm dismissing abuse victims and things like that. I'm not saying no, abuse can have happened, but it may not be the cause of your mental illness, because there are, can I swear?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Please let it out.
There are a fuck ton of people who were abused and are completely fine. Not only are they completely fine, but 90% of Encyclopedia Britannica's most notable people of all time lost one or both parents before the age of 14. A lot of people who get abused go on to achieve wonderful, wonderful things and to change humanity and never have problems. Abuse and mental illness co-occur. That's it. It's not one causing another. Abuse can occur in childhood and someone can be fine, or abuse can occur in childhood and someone can have mental illness in later life.
The studies that are really cool about that are the studies about concentration camp survivors.
Yes, I was just going to say that.
Yep, and I think about Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. Yep. Like, if you want somebody that has gone through adverse childhood things and, look to those studies, that's what I looked at when I was comparatively to prison inmates and then concentration camp survivors and happiness and life satisfaction. So a lot of those studies show that even though, because that would be like the most horrific forms of abuse I could ever imagine on anybody. Like if we're talking about extreme, that's extreme. And how they overcame that and lived satisfying lives afterwards, right? So in the majority, right? So I think these studies are pretty important on things like not just resiliency, but perspective, how you want to view yourself in your world and how you want to move forward with that view of self versus I want to view myself as a traumatized victim of something. Therefore, that's what I'm going to be. And I think about that with when you're talking about the older generations, right? Like, I mean, my parents are firmly in the boomer population, and my grandpa served in World War II when he was 18 years old. My dad enlisted himself at 17, was on an airplane to Vietnam at 18, served 2 tours in Vietnam at 18. You would have thought this man would have been just a fucked up mess. Was he? No, he was incredibly accomplished. And that's also despite a childhood of neglect. He was taken away from his mother. This is back in like the 40s, like he couldn't even be, his mom was gone. And that was unheard of in his childhood. Like moms were everything. So he was so neglected. He was taken from his mother in those times. And he was so accomplished later. Like he was never in that victim mentality. He actually asked me, because then he was a police officer too. And he asked me, he goes, what's the difference? I see guys that like see something, traumatizing essentially, and they lose their mind. And he goes, I've seen so many things and I'm still here. And I just say perspective, you know, perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there's another thing about PTSD and trauma. You know, they tried to create this lowercase t trauma and capital T trauma.
Yes. Big T, little t trauma.
That's great branding. Yep. That is great branding.
It is.
Science.
Yes.
Yeah. And PTSD is a really specific thing. And a lot of people get misdiagnosed with PTSD, which would, be uppercase T trauma. But I've just looked at a study, and 70% of people get diagnosed with PTSD don't actually have PTSD when the assessments are done by like an actual trained person, instead of just like a general practitioner, general psychotherapist. They'll be like, oh, PTSD because a bad thing happened, you must have that. So a lot of people think they have PTSD when they don't. Another thing, PTSD, people recover from it naturally within months in most cases, and certainly after like three years, almost everyone recovers from PTSD just naturally after 3 years. So the idea that you could be abused as a 5-year-old and then you get mentally ill when you're 25 is just a huge extrapolation error. It's like, if you were abused as a childhood, awful, really sorry for you. You have the right to be angry about that, but you probably recovered from that within 3 years. The idea that trauma is this free floating thing that lives in our bodies for decades and then suddenly pops up in mid adulthood is just, it's a fantasy, really. And that's why I think, this explains partly the treatment prevalence paradox. Everyone's trying to heal their trauma, but they don't have trauma, so they can't heal their trauma, so they stay mentally ill.
The perpetual trauma healing community is alive and well. And I have sat with this for a while, and I'm like, why are we perpetually trying to heal all the time? Heal. And I'm like, when are we going to live without having to heal everything all the time, right? We just live our lives. And I do sit in that space sometimes and think, because like, if we're always trying to heal,
well, yeah, look at the language.
Really
that means that means you're always broken too.
All the time.
Like if you look at the language behind it, that I think trips us up as well.
You only have to heal if you're broke.
Like you can't just be with what we've got. We're always searching to like close the chapter and have an answer to something. And the problem is not only does psychology do this and counseling can do this and our fields do this, but it's our job. We are the expert in trying to go, here's what caused this. Here's the label. And we're trying to give that closure almost to people all the time when it's very anecdotal. What we do as therapists is very, very anecdotal. Like there is no big magical. I mean, yeah, you can go full bore and give people full blown assessments. Terry and I did testing for many, 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 many years, right? Even those psych assessments, people would come to the conclusion and go, okay, here's what's caused this. Here's my diagnoses. If I could go back, I would put some clause in every one of those assessments that said, just so you know, half of the tests I used were fraught with conflicts of interest. FYI, because they are. The etiology of many of the assessments that we used have ties to big pharma. Unfortunately, many of them do. Start digging a little bit on where the ACE came from, because that's something we'd give as another assessment, even though it's quick and anybody could give it. We throw the ACE in there too, just to go, yep, here's another little layer into it. And it's actually quite subjective, which I think scares people, because I'm going to go to the expert. The expert, whether it's a therapist, they're going to give me my diagnosis. They're going to tell me what's wrong with me. They're going to help me. I'm going to go to a psychologist and have an assessment done. But that's not the answer actually all the time for people.
No, because then I'm going to be put on medications, which will actually stop my emotional growth and healing, and not make it so I can actually move my way through anything. There's that.
And it is still subjective. As objective as we want things to be, there's still levels of subjectivity within all of it, even in research, as you know, Richard, like even in research, right? Like this is there, it exists. We have to acknowledge it. We can't just take what is spit out at the end and go, that's it. That's the answer. And we stop. That's it. That's it. I'm bipolar 2. This is because of my past. And that's it. It's done. This is how I live my life. Yeah. It drives me insane, which as I talk, I hear myself it's interesting because my therapy clients, when I go down these holes with them, they're just like, well, then what's the point of you, Jen? Why do I have you right now? If you're telling me
Truthbringer, that's the point.
Right, to just keep getting curious about all this. And you're telling me no, people will ask me, I have PTSD. Here's my diagnosis. They come to me, they give me that. They've got some medical records, and I will look at them and I'll say, okay, great. You're getting an adjustment disorder until I get to know you and know everything about you and can actually feel comfortable with giving you that. What do you mean? No, I have PTSD. Yeah, no, you don't. That was someone's subjective opinion. It's not mine. Mine's not formed. And you shouldn't label yourself by that anyways.
Mm-hmm.
It drives me insane.
I want to bring in, so you do a lot with breath work. There was something that I saw recently that said breath work is harmful to some people.
Yes, it can be. So in the study we ran, we had about 5% of people having abreactions. Compare that to some studies that show psychotherapy have 25% of people have abreactions. Just compare that to SSRIs, and it's what, like 70%?
Yeah, 70%
people.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yes, it's really powerful. I do like this saying from Dr. Mukherjee. There are treatments with side effects and treatments that don't work. If you have no side effects at all, it's probably not doing anything for anyone.
Right.
So yeah, the conscious connected breath work I do, it puts people into an altered state. They have done brainwave scans with people and cerebral hemodynamic scans, brain blood flow, and they found that these things change to the same extent as a moderate dose of psilocybin mushrooms. And people have mystical experiences to a similar, like 10% of people have complete mystical experiences with breathwork, 11% have complete mystical experiences on psilocybin mushrooms. So it's definitely doing things that are pretty potent. And there's a lot of bad breath workers out there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
A lot of people who are not breath workers at all. A lot of people who just my first breathwork session was with an actor/yoga teacher who'd been to a breathwork session and then taught a class, and it was an absolute shit show. People running out the room crying, cramping up and stuff. Yeah. No. So you've got to go with someone who's well certified. I work for a breathwork teacher training school, breathguru.com, if you want to train with responsible practitioners. We're GBPA certified, but yeah, it's a wild west. Same as life coaching is a wild west.
Yes.
So yeah, you've got to be careful about who you go with there. And there's big sexual abuse claims as well, like cases, not claims, but breath workers sexually abusing people because they're unlicensed and things like that. It's
I hear that in yoga. I hear that in a lot of spaces, and not to be dismissive of that, but that's definitely a prevalent thing. What you said, there's 5% abreactions, right? You said 5%.
That was what we had in my session
in the study.
Yeah. So we
like what?
What were they?
Yeah, like what?
Emotional flooding was one. So just someone who was just overwhelmed by their emotions and just felt like this is too much for them and they wanted to stop. Another person had an increase in anxiety. So everyone in our study had clinical anxiety. We used the Zung self-rating anxiety scale. One interesting aside there, 20% of the people who applied, who had anxiety didn't even meet criteria for mild anxiety.
Well, that's fascinating, isn't it?
So then another thing was someone had like a dissociation from it. We persisted for a few weeks after. So those types of things, they happen in therapy, they happen in psychedelics, they happen in breathwork as well. So yeah, it's not for everyone. We do have a lot of contraindications. It can lower the threshold of excitability to trigger a seizure in certain people. So people who are prone to seizures with seizure disorders, we don't work with them because of that risk. So yeah, there's definitely
okay. So I need to point out, I'm feeling like there's a difference between this that I don't know. Breath work versus just like yogic breathing. I feel like I'm missing a step here. Like when we're talking about like alternate nostril breathing or just long, slow exhaled breathing, that what you're talking about is different than that. Like it is way deeper than that. So I want the audience to know that, because I don't think that long exhaled breathing is going to cause a seizure or for you to dissociate. So I think that's where the disconnect is for a lot of people. Like, well, there's an abreaction to breathing, like to exhale breathing. No, it's to breath work, which is different than breathing exercises. Okay, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all breath work. I
Yeah.
categorize them as faster than normal breathing and slower than normal breathing. So slower
Mhm.
than normal breathing is, the long exhale. It's your yoga breathing.
Mhm.
It's relaxing you. Then there's faster than normal breathing, such as conscious connected breathing, which is a type of umbrella term for things like holotropic breath work, shamanic breath work, transformational breath work, clarity breath work, rebirthing. These are faster than normal breathing that done, you're doing them lying down, you're doing them with a practitioner, you're doing them, you have to sign a waiver, those types of things,
Mhm.
because it is very stimulating and it puts people in altered states, and emotions come up and all sorts of things. So yeah, that's how I categorize it: faster and slower.
Okay, so it is different than what we typically think of for breathing exercises and stuff,
Right.
okay.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Alright, so I need to bring this up because, you're married to a therapist, right?
Right.
So, yes. So, will you, discuss a little bit about that? Because I'm gonna guess that came I don't know, did that come before or after your training to be in psychology and therapy space? And then you just, met your partner and you're like, "Ah, dang," like, what happened? Yeah.
Yeah. No, we've been together for about 10 years. So we've been on this journey together. We both trained to be breath workers at the same time. And then I started the psychotherapy training, left the psychotherapy training. At that point, I wasn't as sort of clear on how much I disliked it. So I
Mm.
actually paid for her to do the masters in psychotherapy. Um,
That's
uh,
funny.
yeah. Well, and so this, yeah, it's only as I've learned more about therapy, did more research, heard more of the things she was learning, and we sort of went on that journey together. I came to these conclusions on my own. But yeah, I don't want therapy to be gone. I don't think it's useless. I think it's just taken a wrong direction. Therapeutic drift. Have you heard of that
Yeah,
term? That is
Sure.
one of the things that basically therapists get trained to do things that are evidence based, like CBT is the most
mm,
evidence-based, right? And what's it most indicated for is phobia therapy. And what do you do in phobia therapy is you expose yourself
Exposure.
to
Yep.
greater and greater stresses. But for some reason, therapists don't want to do that. And it's not some reason, I know the reasons, I've read the study. They don't want to do that because they don't want to upset their clients. So they do
mm.
psychodynamic therapy. They go deeper, which is better for their pockets because it's much
Forever consumers.
it's forever, and people don't get better, but they think they're getting better. And you said earlier, oh, you make a connection. You make a connection when you're doing a puzzle. If you're doing a 1,000-piece puzzle, you get a dopamine when you a reward of dopamine when you put a puzzle piece that goes together. You get that same dopamine when you're like, oh, my childhood friend said this to me, and it made me
Mhm.
have an eating disorder. Like you make those fake
Attachments.
attachments
Mhm.
in the same
Yeah.
way as you do with making a puzzle. It's not you healing, it's just you getting a reward like you would when you figure out a puzzle. But yeah, the most replicated, the most effective type of treatment is exposure therapy, and that is, I think, that is where therapy works. It's just therapists don't want to do that because I feel like it's also partly like political and social. It's like we're in this world of victim and oppressor,
Yep.
and therapists, a lot of them extremely ideologically, politically one side. They've
Yep.
absorbed that, and then they go, okay, well, that's how I'm going to do my treatment. I'm not going to think, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. We need to find oppressors because you're a victim.
I was gonna
And
say through the lens of oppression is what they do it through, and so that
yeah,
keeps you oppressed when you're through that lens. Yes, exactly. Interesting. Very interesting
Okay, so do you
conversation.
and your wife get into these deep convos about like, yeah, how you might see things differently because your trainings are a little different too? I mean, I know that there's some overlap here, but I could see how these conversations could get you guys could
yeah,
be on opposite sides of some of this here.
for sure. Yeah, and I have other family members who are psychotherapists as well, and they don't
Oh, dang.
don't
Like
love what I'm saying either. uh,
It is pretty freeing to have been that therapist and to come
yeah,
over to the other side after so many years and be like, man, this side is I've been on both sides now, so we can actually talk about both, and
yeah,
it's great because when
yeah,
once
Mhm.
you've done the whole spectrum, you're like, okay, I actually can take a pretty
yeah.
neutral view on all this because I've done it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely causes conflict. Generally, I'm a pretty argumentative guy. My wife's like really nice and sweet and agreeable, and generally just comes round to
That's
my
why you
point
come
of
on the
view.
podcast and you
Yeah,
create the
yeah, I
all
create
that stuff.
controversy, get the
Yes.
stitches, get all the hate, and
That's
then
why you paid for her master's, right?
yeah. But what's working quite well now is like people, come to me and like, oh, I need therapy. I'm like, great, go see my wife. And so
Yeah,
we've got a nice little
perfect.
funnel there.
Yes.
So that works quite well. But yeah, she's. I mean, ultimately, I want to help therapy. I don't want to destroy it. I want to improve it.
Mhm.
Its results are terrible, and I want to make them good. I want to solve the mental health crisis. I don't want to make the mental health crisis work. My objectives are the same. It's just I see a problem, or I believe I see a problem. They don't believe there's a problem. They think everything's fine and they're doing a great job, and it's just the world is oppressing them. It's just the world is way more stressful now, despite all evidence pointing this is the least stressful, easiest time to be alive in history. We're just going about it in a different way.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Because we are running a little bit low on time here. You had mentioned the breath work versus ayahuasca, like plant medicine. That is a topic that we have not discussed on the show yet, is any type of that plant medicine. Would you be willing to just say anything briefly? I know there's probably a ton to cover. Maybe we'll have you back to cover more if you want to. But yeah, what is your take on that? And if you can explain what that might be to our audience who may not have heard it before.
Yeah. So I did an apprenticeship in Peru with Shipibo tribe. I'm not a medicine pourer. To be a medicine pourer, you need to do effectively like 7, 8, 9 years of training, just like you would to become an MD or a doctor in the West. I just did a brief month just to get an idea of it. I was thinking of going down that route, but I chose breathwork instead. It's incredibly powerful. I think it's the most powerful healing tool I've ever come across. It's not for everyone because you vomit and shit yourself and it's really uncomfortable and scary, but it takes you off into other dimensions. Seemingly you meet ancestors, you meet aliens, you have mystical experiences, you meet God, you totally blows your mind to an extent that I can't explain. Like, when you see things on TV or in a movie and you're like, wow, and then you go experience it in real life and you're like, oh, that wasn't as good as in the movies. This is the only thing in life that is ever it's like 10 times better than they make it seem in the movies. It just is unbelievable when done right. But again, there's a lot of controversy in the space. There's a lot of bad.
What is it? I mean, what is it exactly? Can you explain?
Yes, it is a blend of a vine and a herb. So there's chacruna and the ayahuasca, and they contain DMT, and then there's basically something in your stomach that won't digest DMT. So it's an MAO inhibitor. So it's the other plant allows you to digest it, and then that DMT goes into the body. So it's a drink. It's a tea. Technically, it's disgusting. It's one of the worst tasting things you'll ever experience, and it lasts for maybe 4 to 8 hours. You do it in the dark because you get visions, and if you have a light on, it sort of blocks those visions as well. There's done studies on psilocybin mushrooms. It's similar. If you do the stuff with your eyes open, you don't get the dendrite growth. So that's like parts of the brain that grow. So when people be like, yeah, I'm doing psychedelic therapy, yeah, I took mushrooms and went to a rave, I'm like, no, you're partying. Great, have fun, but you're not healing.
Yeah. That scares to even think about. Like, I can't even fathom being in a space where 4 to 8 hours that scares the living shit out of me.
What scares the crap out of me is the loss of control. Like, I'm a control freak, so there's like no way. There's absolutely no way. However, you mentioned that ayahuasca and breath work have very similar outcomes, right? So I think that's interesting, because that is all the power of physiology in the mind without anything altering substances or anything within it except for your breath. Like, do you know the science behind that? Like, what's the reason we can get to those altered states just through breath work?
Yeah. There's a few hypotheses. One is the serotonin 5-2A hypothesis. So we create these pivotal mental states, basically with psilocybin and ayahuasca and with breathwork. you're creating a change to the serotonin 5-HT2A receptors, and it's creating more plasticity in the brain, and that's when you can make changes, because a lot of people with depression and anxiety, they're kind of stuck in loops, just stuck in sort of low entropy, ruminating over the same thing, going over the same thought patterns over and over, and they don't, they can figure out their problems, make those puzzle pieces, but then they don't make those changes. But it's a kind of evolutionary process. Like, if someone, you're in a tribe, right? You're in a cave and a tiger eats your leader. You need to make a big change, right? You need to move caves. You can't just go, oh, I'm going to stay here and talk about my tiger problem. You have to go to another cave, and this creates a big step in plasticity in people's lives, and then they make those changes. Similar when it's like, someone never changes. Someone's an alcoholic, and then they get diagnosed with liver disease, and they're going to die unless they stop alcohol. They suddenly overnight are no longer alcoholics when they couldn't change for many years. That's the plasticity. That's the pivotal mental states type thing. So that's one theory of how it works, how it creates the psychedelic-like effects. Martha Havenith at the Max Planck Institute is another breathwork researcher. She has finally gotten the funding to test whether or not conscious connected breathwork makes you produce DMT in your body, because supposedly we do have DMT in our lungs. It gets released at times of like extreme stress, birth, death, near-death experiences type thing. So some people think it's because we have DMT in our body, and breathwork releases that. So she's gonna test that and find out.
The DMT. So what does that do? That allows, I don't have the right language, like allows the hallucinations and stuff like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So DMT is the active ingredient in ayahuasca. Psilocybin is the active ingredient in.
Well, because I'm thinking about like women who, after they give birth, have psychotic or psychosis after birth. Like, that makes sense. That makes sense to me on a weird level, that if we do have that and we're birthing, right? And then you become psychotic after that, like hallucinating or things like that, that maybe that's just your body's natural process, and you don't need an antipsychotic for the rest of your life.
Maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
Perhaps, so that's interesting. Our bodies are freaking amazing. So it's like almost everything almost everything we need is located within us. Oh, that's so therapy cliche, isn't it? Yeah, but it's there. It's definitely there. Yeah. Interesting. So is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know or understand about breath work, or any message that you're like so passionate about that you haven't already discussed today?
One thing that comes to mind is just the Scar Row effect. Have you heard of the Scar Row effect?
No, I have not.
No. So it's one theory that I quite like, is to explaining the treatment prevalence paradox. And it's basically, in the past, nurture mattered more than nature, because life was so hard. There were famines, we were always fighting wars and things like that. So our personalities couldn't really come through to create mental illnesses. Now we've kind of conquered nature and our lives are extremely comfortable. Now our nature comes through. So people in the past who would have been like really high in neuroticism, their neuroticism couldn't have come through because they were fighting wars and all those types of things. And now it's basically all these mental illnesses have just been revealed by our extremely comfortable circumstances, and it's actually our genetics that are causing all the increases in anxiety, depression, and those types of things.
That's fascinating, actually, because it's like sustained attention. Like, if you can't be a nervous wreck if you're chasing or running from a bear. Like, you're just living in survival and those things. Or you can't be depressed if you're being chased by a bear, because it won't allow you to be depressed. You're just running for your life, right?
Yeah, you're allocating resource allocation goes where it needs to go based on what's taking the priority.
Right.
Time. So then what you're saying is based off genetics, and then continuing to produce offspring through the generations. Then we get to the spaces where it's built in somewhat to our DNA and it's in there. And now we're in spaces where we're not having to fight all the time. And now we're seeing some of that. That's interesting.
And it's another red herring, because therapists think parents cause mental illness, or some parents do. So they point at that when actually it's someone's genetics. And I just think, therapy in my therapy training school, my wife's therapy training school, not once did they ever talk about how seasonal affective disorder could cause depression, or inflammatory foods can cause anxiety, or mold can cause depression. It's just always what happened to you.
What happened to
people
you?
get blamed.
Somebody did something to you is usually what it is. Yes.
Yeah. Instead of lack of spiritual connection, lack of exercise, low vitamin B, all these things, low vitamin D can cause mental illness. But therapists don't
thyroid being off. There's so many things. Before you came on, Richard, I was telling Terry about how most of my life people keep telling me that I should be traumatized by my childhood. Seriously, like even growing up, right? Like there was divorce with my parents. There was very big financial hardships, all the things, right? When I became an EMDR trainer, that's what I picked for my target, because I had to do EMDR myself. And I'm like, well, I better pick the one thing that everybody keeps telling me I have trauma over, was my parents divorcing when I was younger, and all the things that I've been through, right? And it's fascinating because as much as everybody in my life has told me that this must be the thing, Jen, it's not a thing. I don't give a shit. Like, it doesn't impact me at all. And that's exactly what you're kind of talking about today. And so we were talking about the treatment prevalence paradox, right? More, and how I kept being told, like, oh, here's why you have depression, Jen. This might be why. Because of what happened to you.
Jen, you're in denial. You've repressed it.
I was told that because I'm Gen X. So, it's the same thing.
This, right? Like and this is what we're taught, though. So to close off what you were just saying, like, this is how clinicians are taught. This is the model under which we are taught. I mean, and so we walk out of school with these skill sets, and they are, guys, you got to get more curious about this, because they can be grossly inaccurate.
Yeah.
And harmful. And harmful.
Yeah. This is the closed loop of trauma theory. It's like, do you have trauma? Yes. Do you have trauma? No, you repressed it. Oh, okay. It must be trauma then. All
you
roads
just don't know it
lead
yet.
to trauma.
You just don't know it yet.
And if you're not mentally ill, we'll make you think you're mentally ill by saying, no, you're not fine. You're not fine because you had abuse. You're not fine. Until you give in and you're like, oh yeah, I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we've just created that forever person, that forever consumer, that person who's always going to seek out sources. And we just took away their agency, right? Like, internally, there's none of that anymore. They're not listening to themselves. Yep, I do. I've got trauma because my parents got divorced. Yep. That's it.
I don't think I can practice in this space anymore, Jen. I think I told her last night, I said, I'm going to become a Walmart greeter very soon. And I think maybe that time
the farther we get down the rabbit holes, the more and more we're like, man, like, maybe this whole therapist thing for us, we just don't know how much longer we can do it.
It's pretty bad. Anyway, you're a wise human to not travel down the path. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you guys have hung out with us this far, this is the Gaslit Truth Podcast. And please like, follow, comment, subscribe, do all the things, and send us your Gaslit Truth stories at the Gaslit Truth Podcast at gmail.com. And thank you, Richard Blake, for joining us. It was wonderful.
Thank you for having me.